All right, with the book of Job, it's important to understand kind of where we are in the style of writing in the Old Testament. So far, we have really been advancing the timeline of the Israelites and God's work within that nation. But when we get to the book of Job, we're no longer advancing that timeline. Everything that we're going to read from here on out in the Old Testament is written during or about the history we've already read. So Job begins what we call the wisdom or the poetic literature of the Old Testament: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. And now you may hear that and you think, man, Job is nowhere near Psalms or Proverbs, but that's because in our English readings of it, we miss a lot of times the fact that it was originally written, or at least the main body of it was originally written in a Hebrew poetry kind of literature. And when we zoom out and we look at the major themes in this section, right? Like Job is dealing with pain and suffering. Psalms is songs of praise and lament. Proverbs is wise sayings about everyday life. Ecclesiastes is the pursuit of purpose. Song of Solomon is all about love. And so when you put all of these things together in this section of the Old Testament, what we get is a full picture of the human experience and what it looks like to pursue God through some really complex emotional realities. Now, the book begins really intentionally vague. We're not told a lot about Job. He's a non-Israelite in a really unknown kind of land, because the point really isn't who Job is, but rather what he experiences. In the opening scene, we get a picture of the accuser before the throne of God. And the emphasis, the point there doesn't seem to be that the devil has free access to heaven, but rather that the work of the enemy is both limited and controlled. Now, right from the very beginning, we're kind of confronted with the problems of pain and suffering in the story of Job. And listen, fair warning, if you are looking for the answer to why do bad things happen to good people, you're not going to find that in this book. That's not what it's about. Rather, this book kind of forces us to ask and answer the question, are we willing to trust that God is good? Job is called a righteous person, and yet he faces unthinkable tragedy and loss, and a group of friends then come to comfort him, and that becomes the major focus of the book. We go back and forth in this conversation between Job and his friends. Job does assume that he is innocent. Therefore, his sufferings must either not be controlled by God, or maybe God's not even just in that. And so Job you'll see Job go back and forth between worshiping God and really trying to wrestle with God. It's an incredible picture of how complex deep grief can be. His friends, on the other hand, will continually argue that there's no way God would ever let a righteous person suffer or hurt in any way. Therefore, Job must be hiding some very serious sin. And as you read through some of their conversation, a lot of what they say in their theology of God, it sounds really good, and they start in a really good place, but then the application gets way off. Now, we don't know how many days, months, years Job sits in this suffering, but we know for 37 chapters, Job really is sitting in silence. And then finally, God speaks. And when God speaks, he doesn't answer the why question. He doesn't tell Job why he's facing all of this pain. Rather, he reminds us that we simply cannot comprehend the greatness of God and all that he holds. Now, in the end, the story of Job is an invitation to trust God's wisdom, right? It serves as this kind of cautionary reminder that if we constantly try to look for the reasons underneath the pain and the difficulty of life, we will risk simplifying God or accusing him. The reality is, the finite, you and I, cannot fully comprehend the infinite. But when we trust in him and we trust that he is good, then we have reason to have confidence in no matter what the circumstances of life are.